Tabletop players, my name is Ruin Ortega, and in this episode, my co-host Cade will not be joining me. That's right, Cade has taken some time to do some soul searching and fight the car that once tried to claim his life with his bare hands. No, but in all seriousness, I'm actually joined by two very, very special people in tonight's episode. And one you know and love, and that is Jodi. He's here to help me conduct an interview because we have an even more special guest, Seth Skorkowsky. Many of you may know him from the tabletop scene. He runs a YouTube channel and is an author and all that good stuff, of course, which I get into in the episode. But yeah, he is a super, super approachable guy who was gracious enough to give his time for our small little show here, and he was an absolute delight to speak to, both on recording and off. And so special thank you to him for giving us his time, and hopefully you guys like what we have in store for you. Now, Kate's not here to help me with my coffee review, so just remember that it is the Black Cherry Bourbon by Fire Department Coffee, and we had a score of 4.25. Mysteriously Absent Wives. Make sure you go back to our first episode of the actual play of Zweihander, or as we pronounce in this episode, Zweihander, so that you can actually see why we rated it that way. We have some extra special notes there. I have no dumb joke for you tonight because I don't have anybody who can audibly sigh and wish they had chosen a different friend to respond to. And so with that, grab a cup, fill it full of hot stuff, and let's get into this amazing casual conversation with one Seth Skorkowsky. All right. So yeah, normally we have like an introduction at the beginning. So it's gonna be a weird. Yeah, you get it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've done these. Don't worry.
All right. Well, the titular figure of a YouTube channel that discusses numerous topics related to tabletop RPGs, author of both the Valducan series and Ashes of Onyx, as well as many more short stories, two-time Annie Award winner, both for his YouTube channel and for collaboration on Tales from the Miskatonic Valley for Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu. Ladies and gentlemen, Seth Skorkowsky. Seth, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No, thank you for having me.
It's a really cool experience to have you here. I know we said before the show started, Jodi and I are huge fans of your content that you put online, and it's helped a lot of us. So again, thank you for sparing the time.
Well, yeah, I'm happy it's helpful. One of the big things with my channel is I always say, if I can't be helpful, I can at least be entertaining. And a lot of those how-to videos are actually hell to make because I'm trying to be very careful to make sure, one, I get the rules right. You have no idea how well you learn the rules, and you're trying to make sure you're telling them right on a video because you'll get called out forever. So many times making the video, I'm like, well, crap, we were doing that wrong, but now I know. But you're trying to lay it out in a very educational format. And I've done these things multiple times now. Every time I'm like, I'm going to make a video and it's going to help people. And like somewhere on the fourth episode, it's like, God, geez, why the hell did I do this? This is a nightmare.
I've been there. I understand that experience. And I would say that I do like that your videos are both educational and entertaining. Like, it's not purely one or the other, and it makes a nice middle ground for a viewer.
I'm glad. It's been an experiment. It's basically I threw a bunch of stuff at a wall to see what stuck, and none of it was ever planned in advance. It was just one day like, I'm going to put on a stupid hat and throw on a sepia filter and just talk to myself because that's a lot more interesting than just watching my dumb face talking. And finally it's like, well, at the time I had like long hair, so I'm just let my hair down, put a baseball cap backwards. I'm going to be this player. And then I cut my hair, and thanks to COVID, I'm getting a ponytail back. So then I had to steal one of my wife's wigs just to keep this character going because he had already become a thing. And didn't even name those characters for like the first year. I refused to believe they were a thing that I did. It was like,
yeah, putting a name to it becomes too real, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, it's funny how those things that you just do for one time all of a sudden become the things. And people, if you didn't have it, people would be really upset with you over it, right?
Oh God, yeah. It's like I have to answer to them if I stopped doing Dweebles, which, by the way, is the one that I hate doing the most because it requires that I've got this comb over, which requires about half a pound worth of gel in my hair just to pull this like really horrible comb over, and
for like 10 minutes of a shtick, right?
Oh, I have done it where like he literally says like one line, and then it's like, well, I need to come up with more reasons to do this because this like took a long time to put together. Then I had to hang this tapestry thing behind him to change the background and stick this really horrible fake goatee on. So like, so just have expressions so I could cut to him reacting to stuff. That's literally just to justify to myself why I went through all the effort to comb my hair so far over, because it's not pleasant. And had I known I was committing for the rest of my life to this, I would have absolutely given him a different look. Yeah, maybe one day I'll find some just awful comb over wig and just wear that.
Well, your fans love it, obviously. It's something that you have to bring back. So is there anything that you can add to our kind of little introduction of yourself there? It seems like you've done quite a bit.
I started as a writer, and I did a lot of short stories for several years, various fantasy stories, and then some of it kind of got assembled into this Black Raven series. And I've been talking to a small press for years about putting together a book following this thief character, and it was called my Black Raven series. And then he ended up pitching that to a much larger publisher who was like, I talked to the editor-in-chief, and they were like, hell yeah, this sounds great. Send it to me, and we'll see if we'll approve it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a major publisher. And the writing industry is ridiculously slow. For example, after 24 months, 2 years after not hearing anything, I finally retracted it, because at that point I'm like, I need a yes or a no. At this point, I don't care if it's a yes or a no. I have been in a 2-year holding pattern because I have this other small press that would absolutely do this right now. But I don't even know if you guys definitely want it or not. And so we ended up doing that with a small press, who then, before it came out, went under. And that was the end of that story. Meanwhile, I started a urban fantasy series, because you're waiting for a couple of years, and of novels. And I sold that first book, and that was Dameron, the first in the Valducan series. And the small press knew the small press I was doing the other one with, and they actually basically sold them the Black Raven stuff. So then all of a sudden I got all my books out, but it was this horrible hodgepodge way of mostly waiting while I wrote different novels. So then I got 4 novels out, 2 Black Raven books, and then another novel, Ashes of Onyx. And I wanted to create a YouTube channel early on as part of a way to kind of promote myself as an author, get my name out there, and get people familiar with me. And I was told I should do this in 2014 when my debut novel came out, but I had no idea what the hell I wanted to do a YouTube channel about. Like, people are like, do it over writing. And say, there's a lot of people that can do a much better show about writing technique than me. I've got one book. Brandon Sanderson's got one, and he writes a book every 30 minutes. So how can I give something that he can't do better, and already has done better? And then my channel just kind of happened one day. The first video was very spontaneous. I had a very bad game, just abysmal, legendarily bad game. It was actually the end of a player for me. And I was very bitter, and I was very upset that it had to lead to that. And I wrote down what I call the RPG social contract, as far as what a healthy game group should have. And so as my own catharsis, I just set up a camera. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't have any good equipment. I literally had a point and click camera with its onboard audio, which was bad for onboard audio, which is already starting at the bottom. And it was like really bad. And I literally had a Post-it note with just some bullet points. And it was this 30-minute video, one take, posted up, no editing, terrible. But that got me started. And then, once you do the first one, the second one is a lot easier, and the third one, and the fourth one. So I started coming up with like, well, I think I'll review. I think Cyberpunk 2020 was my next one. And once again, I didn't know how to edit. I was just making videos and figuring it out. So it was this complete learning curve. And I've known a lot of people since then. They're like, oh, I want to get in a YouTube channel. And they invest hundreds of dollars and they map out what they're going to do. And they've got this plan. And I'm kind of in awe of that, because it was like, well, one day I just stuck a camera up and talked like an idiot. And I put up a video that is so terrible that I later on redid those videos.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I don't even want a record of that, because if somebody, that was their first impression of me, they wouldn't watch any of the new stuff that's dramatically better. It's like, at this point, this is hurting me. It's so horrible, but it did its purpose. And so kind of how I ended up here is this really long, meandering journey.
But those are always the ones that turn out the best, right? The ones that it's not an overnight immediate success. It's that you were just trying to find your place. And I see a lot of parallel. I mean, obviously we are far less out there than you are in terms of popularity and all that. We only started about 6 months ago, and it was, I feel exactly how you did. You put something out there, and then you're like 6 months later, you're like, why did I do it that way? This is the worst thing that I could have put out. But there's something just so beautiful about but you did it, right? Like you had a start.
Oh, yeah. And it's kind of good that you don't start off like with 1 million people watching you, because that way there's less people that witnessed the awkward teenage years.
Yeah.
My channel, I pumped out a lot of content really fast at the beginning, because I wanted to have kind of a foundation of stuff. That way, if one person found me, I've got like 4 or 5 other videos out there. And it took 9 months before my channel actually picked up. I was actually about to throw in the towel, because it's like, okay, I've spent God knows how many hours putting this together. I spent 9 months, and I still had like 500 subscribers, and most of my comments were just trolls,
as the internet is.
Yeah, nothing makes you feel good. Like you wake up in the morning, you drink your coffee, and there's like messages on your phone. It's like, you're stupid and ugly, and you're wrong, and everything you've ever tried, you should die. And it's like, okay, well, that was my morning. And finally, some video, I guess somebody shared it somewhere. I never found out what the hell happened, but then my channel exploded one day, and the rest is history. But at least by the time that happened, I had 9 months worth of flailing around to figure out what I want to do, how I wanted to do it, and also find my voice, because a lot of the others, you don't really know how you want to approach things, and you're trying to kind of find your own creator voice, because you don't want to sound like anyone else. But at the same time, sometimes you look back on a video and you're like, okay, I was like evidently kind of in some mood that I wanted to make it more like kind of like in your face. And that's not me. Like, I don't even like I hate that video. Yeah. And so some of the ones I've taken down were like ones I'd forgotten about. And then like one day somebody gives a comment on it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is still out there. Like, oh, well, yeah, I don't even blame this person for having this negative opinion of me. Like, this is a terrible video. Just let's get rid of that. And anything important I had to say, I can say that much better now, without kind of being awkward or just not really being kind of sincere in how I really am. So it's one of the things a lot of people don't realize is, even if you're sticking a camera up, you have to kind of learn how to actually be yourself and not be performing. Because once there's a camera on you and you're recording it, you actually you pick up this weird persona, and sometimes it just takes a while to realize like that's not me, and you learn how to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Crazy how much of the stuff you're saying is just hitting me right in the feels, like going through creating my YouTube channel and stuff. Yeah. And like, especially being live on stream too, with the camera, like live directly to the viewers. It's like, don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything stupid.
Oh my God. It is the weirdest terror of like, am I suddenly just going to get like possessed by a demon and just say something horrible? Like, it's not even an irrational fear, but for some reason it's like, man, I'm live. I better not just suddenly like get on some sort of, some sort of just terror or something. Like, no, I don't know why I would. It doesn't never happen, but I don't know. It's live. Who knows? So
yeah, the odds might be stacked against you, and for whatever reason, that one day you slip up and say something you've never said in your life before.
Yeah, it's like, oh, and then that day I somehow developed Tourette's, and and I love live streams. Like, I end them and I'm so jonesed. Like my wife can't stand it because I'll come out of the room all like, yeah, this is great. Yeah, she's like, how long am I supposed to do it? Mine go for like 2 hours because I love it so much while I'm doing it. It takes me 6 months to work up the nerve to do it again, because up until the moment it starts, I'm like, oh man, there's just such a pain. And then once I actually turn on the camera, they're an absolute blast. I did a lot of debate in high school. I was a competitive debater, and I used to explain I was scared out of my mind at every competitive speaking event I've ever done in my life up into the moment I opened my mouth. And then I was absolutely comfortable. And when I go to conventions, either writing conventions or gaming conventions, it's the same deal. I am nervous. My stomach is doing knots. Like, it's like, oh God, this is going to be terrible up into the moment when I start. And then it's like, oh, this is comfortable. I love this. But the next time you're not going to remember that part. You're just back to being afraid, like you've never done it before or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Like in my own career, I speak to people every day in front of large audiences, and man, so there are some days when I get up there and I just do it like almost automatically, and then I get out and I'm like, did I do that right? Like, is that something I should have done? And then, you just, the next time you get up there, you're just like, okay, we're just going to do it again. And it becomes second nature, I think, and you're right. You still have those moments of fear, but ultimately, you're going to come out okay.
Yeah.
You do it in front of kids, and kids are savage. I can't imagine the like nerve, man.
You're a brave man, sir.
Well, those who are, can't do. No, I'm kidding. That's a terrible saying. It's awful. You have to know what you're talking about, but it's no different from what you guys do, and I have to commend you guys because the dedication of your guys' content, you even just said you commit to that shtick for however long, at least if I did something one day and it was terrible, I go in the next day and I, tail between my legs and say, okay, kids, that didn't really work. Let's try it again. Like I have a redo, and they respect that. But so obviously we've been talking about, how your channel has developed and evolved over time, but really, like, take us back to the start. Where did this all begin? How were you introduced to tabletop games?
Okay, so I live in Texas, in the deep in the Bible Belt of the U.S. And during the 80s, when I was a kid, we had the Satanic Panic.
Yes, you did.
And there is all the stories of Dungeons and Dragons and Satanists and all the horror stuff that you heard. That was my hometown. If you ever find a book, and it's across the room, otherwise I'd get up to and show it to you, since at least we're on Zoom or podcasters can't see this. There is an amazing book, and not amazing as in good, but amazing as in wow, called what is the call of it? It's by a woman called Pat Pulling, The Devil's Web, and it is over the evils of Dungeons and Dragons and how it will turn you all into baby eating Satanists and all that. That book's the publisher is from my small East Texas town. Like that is, I was at ground zero of the hate of Dungeons and Dragons.
That's so good.
Okay, so there's the foundation. I always refer to it as the old punk rocker in me. Then at that time, it was the young budding punk rocker in me that was like, well, this is bad. I want to know more about it. And so when I was in middle school, what we had at our school is we'd have like our little homeroom, and there was some sort of like little magazine that I guess middle school kids got that was primarily ads to sell crap to middle school kids with like one or two articles that might be remotely useful, but they're under the guise of educational. And there was this full page ad for Dungeons and Dragons, and it said, "It's back." And my friends and I, we actually thought D&D was illegal. Like we thought it was a devil game that was outlawed. And yeah, I saw that. I'm like, oh my God, yes. Yeah, tell my buddy Aaron, like, it's like D&D's legalized again. So for my 13th birthday, I was
legalize it, man.
Okay. I'm not like, I was a complete moron.
Man,
so
it was the war on D&D. It wasn't
yes.
even Satanic Panic.
And well, you know, Pat Pulling, there was an organization that's kind of like how Dare is and Mad, and it was called BAD, BADD, and it was bothered about Dungeons and Dragons. Like this was a thing. So
It's amazing.
I have considered getting, because I never found a logo of theirs, and when she passed away, that organization went away. I thought about having some shirts with the logo made, and just to like wear them at Gen Con, just to like troll people. But it's like, man, I don't know, that might be taking it too far. Like I might
tell you, that's a million seller t-shirt.
I might get like throat punched and dragged behind like some dumpsters somewhere and then just murdered, and I could kind of deserve it. But,
all the LARPers would come out and drag you away.
But so for my 13th birthday, my mom got me the box set for D&D, and that was in 91. And you can do the math there, but it had this neat little adventure you like dungeon master yourself through. So technically my first game, I technically GM'd and I played by myself.
Wow.
And I think like, yeah, my mom helped me out. But then shortly after that, like 2 weeks after that, yeah, I'm telling my buddy Aaron again, at like a Boy Scout meeting about D&D, and this kid comes up and is like, "That's not how elves work." And I'm 13. He's like 11, which when you're a little kid is like 100 years.
Yep.
And he had been playing advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And his dad was a DM going back to the 70s. And we ended up creating a D&D group out of that. So I started playing in a group when I was 13. And by 14, I was trying to DM on the side with my friends. And that group, we maintained all the way through high school. And I was GMing pretty regularly around the age of 15 is when I kind of got my own game going on. So we'd have like the old group and then like my group going, and they're all the same people, and doing that. And then somewhere around, I guess, 17, I discovered girls and punk rock music. So it didn't, I didn't play as much until college. And then I started playing with a couple friends, and it just kind of maintained. When I moved off to the university, when I was 20, I formed a group. It was seven players. 2 of them are still with me today. So January of 99, we actually call like when the day our group formed, and one of them I married and the other is my best friend. And we've been playing together now for 22 years. So
it's awesome.
So it's been kind of a long journey, but there you go.
Yeah, that's such a bad deal though. It's kind of funny too. My first experience with like a dice rolling game too was like DMing myself through this thing, the Middle Earth Quest like standalone book.
Oh, those choose your own adventure books?
Yeah,
those
it's
were
OG, man.
amazing.
I found this in a van in a like car wrecking lot in a box of books. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's like 9.
It's amazing.
Yeah, dude.
And I love that you still have it.
Yeah, I've kept it. It's one of like the few books from my childhood that I actually like made a point to keep.
That's awesome. I, unlike the two of you, I got into it a lot later in life. Spent a lot of my life rejecting the fact that I was a nerd because bullying was real and just wanted to avoid it. Before finally end of high school and college, university, finally just being like, F it and going with it. And a friend invited me to a Warhammer fantasy session. And I went and I was just blown away. And like I was already into my career at that point, and I went to work the next day and was just like talking about it. And people are like, "This is a video game?" And I'm like, "No, that's the best part. It's a story that they tell, and you do things." And it's been like no looking back since. And I would say Cthulhu was my first shot at DMing and being a keeper of, and it just changed the way I looked at the games entirely. All of a sudden it was almost kind of like a veil was lifted, and I could just all of a sudden see that there was so much more to this world than just sitting down at a table. Like it went beyond. There's the planning, the investigating, the doing everything with it.
The most valuable lesson at tabletop gaming, well, there's a few. I'm not gonna say it's the most, but it's one of the most, is diversifying your games. I've talked to a lot of gamers who have it's usually D&D. Most of us started with D&D. It's just it's sheer numbers. They've got more players than everybody else combined. So
and it's the one that's referenced everywhere too. Like if you hear about it in a movie or something, it's always the one that's referenced.
And that actually was the Satanic Panic, because D&D became a household name. But I always try to say, it's like, if they've only been playing D&D this whole time, it's like, you do realize that it literally just takes a couple sessions of completely different games, and all of a sudden your realization of what you can actually really do with these suddenly just exponentially explodes. So we did D&D, and then we had a couple little games periodically of Star Frontiers, which was like D&D in space, like an old 80s game. But then I started playing a Cyberpunk 2020, which was a skill-based system. It didn't work anything like D&D. And when we finally changed that to be our primary game, it was like our entire the limits. We always said it was unlimited. We realized that we had limited ourselves as far as what we thought we could do, and it's just suddenly exploded. And we played a lot of different games. Then we came back to D&D. We played it even better because we knew different ways of playing, and I knew different ways of running. And it's just a really cool way of kind of expanding it, because sometimes you don't realize that you have found a rut until you leap out of it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, there's so much more that I can do. Or there are ways that I can enjoy this that I had never considered before. Or that other game couldn't really accommodate this as well. So I love stories of people that switch games and all of a sudden it's like this aha moment, because I've had that a couple of times in my life.
Yeah, that's what Cthulhu did for me. Was like, I still don't really love role playing in a fantasy setting. I'm more there to like hack and slash at monsters and like D&D and stuff. But when we played Cthulhu and it was set in like more of a real world grounded setting, like there's obviously a lot of fantasy in it, but it's like real world. I found I could just like slip into role playing so much easier there. And then I didn't want to play like the warrior character anymore. All of a sudden I wanted to be like the face, the personality guy in the party talking to all the NPCs.
That is exactly how it is for us. For some reason, whenever we try a fantasy game, and it doesn't matter what fantasy game or what system or any of that, we fall back into I am a warrior, and it becomes very combat based. And D&D was my primary game for 18 years. I mean, there's a lot of old habits that are very difficult to break, and we had a lot of fun. But you put us in a game that I call modern-ish, which is like late 1800s up through sci-fi.
Yeah.
It is totally different. I once said in a live cast or something like that pretty much like, once you have guns, I'm actually that's the time period that I want to play. And a lot of people are like, well, why don't you put guns in D&D? It's like, it has nothing to do with the firearms. I'm just talking about the time the technology started, because I could do Victorian, like Sherlock Holmes, and I could do that and that'd be awesome. But for some reason, just the classic fantasy does not appeal to me the way it once did. It's basically, I spent so much time doing that once I found out everything else, I'm trying to play catch up. I won't be playing catch up for years.
Yeah, I agree with you about the whole, it's the fantasy just doesn't seem the same once you realize what's out there. And maybe you love it just as much, but that there's more. And that's kind of what we're all about on our channel here is we explore a different game every time we do an actual play. And we've recently expanded it. So now we're doing 4 episodes of actual play per system. And then we just move on to a next one. And what we found is that every system has something that makes it so unique because everybody wants to be different from the rest. And so we get to see it. And on top of that, it makes us more aware of what we can do in every game. You just a compilation of knowledge for it. We're actually playing Zweihander right now. Have you played that?
No. Is that how you pronounce that?
Well, I'm sure it's more like
Zweihander.
Zweihander.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, it's like I've never said it aloud in a video because it's like, well, I'm 1000% guaranteed to mispronounce this. And the last thing I want to do on a recording is mispronounce it because you'll be getting corrected over it till the day you die. No, I've that's always got like a book. It's like 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick.
Look at this.
There's a rule
like 672 pages. Like, it is the heftiest book, but it has probably everything that you need to run. Like, it's got the bestiary in it. It's got the combat, the rules. It's got a scenario. It actually says like most of this stuff you won't need because it tries to be low fantasy and like more about the intrigue. But it's like, even if it isn't intended, we're putting it there because we know you might want it.
What I was saying too when we were playing is like the individual book might be really intimidating, but it's like no bigger than the DM Guide, Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, like all put together, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, even the Player's Guide is just an abridged version, of just what you would need for that. But the thing that I find really interesting about, the one that all of us are going to mispronounce is that
I'll try it. Well, if afterwards you could play every time we tried to pronounce it, and they'll all be different. It'll be.
I got it, man. It's Zweihander. Like that's how you pronounce
Zweihander?
it. No. Zweihander.
Zweihander.
Yeah, it's like a V, like Zweihander. Anyway.
No, I'm gonna embrace it. I am a heavily white male, okay, and so I'm gonna just say
that's a German word, bro.
I'm pretty sure Zweihander.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. I am a heavily Canadian white male.
Okay.
Anglo. There we go. So, anyways, so Zweihander. It has this mechanic that's called the social intrigue, and it is basically a combat system for dialogue. And it's like when the DM introduces it, it's like, this is a situation where you have a complete objective that you're trying to get. You have information you want, and here is how you're going to do it, and also what's at stake. So, like, what happens if you fail? And you talk about it as a group, almost like you're setting initiative. And then you choose which tactic you're going to use. So like, are you going to intimidate them? Are you going to use guile? Like, how are you going to talk to them? And then you role play it. And meanwhile, the GM in the background has done the rolls to see if you're going to be not just successful, but how they're going to respond to your tactics. And if you choose the wrong tactic, you critically fail. Or if you choose the right one, you critically succeed. And then there's like various degrees in between, but it turns it into a full on like contest. And I think it's really cool because they're then rewarding you for role playing.
I'd have to see that, like, to like kind of break, like, to see really how it works. That sounds cool. I also love the fact if you do look at a lot of games, you can find mechanics like that, and then you just kind of bring them over into the next game that you do. Like, fifth edition was the first time I encountered inspiration, which evidently they got it from somewhere else, but it was the first time I saw it. I've brought that into Call of Cthulhu. I've brought it into Traveler. It's one of those, like, this is mine now. This will follow me to every possible game that it could possibly work in. We're going to be starting Cyberpunk Red soon. It's like, I'm taking inspiration with me. It's like, it's my little best friend. So you can take that sort of way to approach dialogue and all that. And then when you pick up the next one, you kind of look at it and go, okay, it's not going to be the exact same, but I can kind of work this in as far as that. And then the players, they already know how to approach it that way. So they're already going to be approaching it with this little bit of experience. And it's really cool because you don't realize how much it actually taught you a different way of role playing. It's not like you couldn't have done it before, but now you know about it and it's an open option. So I love that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, that brings up the next part here is, what kind of tips do you have for somebody who's just starting out as a game master or a player?
My number one is have fun. Don't worry about anything else, as long as everyone in the room is having fun and the enjoyment of you and everyone else in the room. And that's the key. It has to be a selfless enjoyment, because this is a group game, is the most important thing. Second, with GMs, you are going to make a mistake. Hell, I make mistakes freaking constantly. I think a lot of people have in their mind that they must be at godlike mastery before they can begin, and they intimidate themselves out of it. And they think, oh, they're all going to hate the game or whatever, because they've put this weird mental block on themselves. Don't be afraid to suck. Just go for it and have fun. Have fun. Laugh about it later. Of like, man, I remember that time I totally screwed up, and you guys totally screwed up, but we had a bunch of laughs. That is the most important thing. So don't walk in with a preconceived notion of you must be this competent, have this much type of fun or this type of thing before you're allowed to enjoy it. Just walk in and just have a blast. And afterwards, you've learned something, and the next time you'll be better, and the next time you'll be better, and you'll still screw up occasionally, but it always gets easier from that first one. So just do it.
The way I always looked at it with DMing when I first started out was like, if I'm gonna suck with confidence. And like, just even if you don't know what you're talking about, you just say it with like a little air of authority, and it's like, guess what, I'm the game master, so you have to do what I say. And as long as everyone's having fun, it's like, all right, we're doing it.
And I think a lot of us, it becomes the forest for the trees sort of thing, where a lot of people get very obsessed, which I'll see commenters on my videos or in different groups where they become fixated of this particular aspect or this particular thing is absolutely essential for the game, and if it's not there, the whole world ends. It's like, fun is number one. After that, it's all icing. But if people don't have that mentality of, this is for not just me, but everyone in the room, we're going to have a blast and we're going to laugh and we're going to be a bunch of dorks, everything after that's icing. So that's my big advice.
Yeah, I think that really hits home with anybody who's been in that position, or even been a player in that room. And maybe, you always get those players that are a little bit too hardcore about the rules. And, you just kind of want to say, like, chill. Your social contract and your RPG philosophy series, I mean, those nail it in saying, like, this is how you get a cohesive gameplay experience.
And one of I think this is might have been before we started recording conversation, but when I first started, I had a little bit more of an in your face in certain videos. And I remember one comment that I had, and I never responded, and I don't even know how to find it. It's buried under years of comments. It was a guy basically saying, like, you're wrong, and this is how you need to talk to your group to keep them together. And he gave us his example that he basically pulled the stick out of his butt, and they've been playing together for 2 years. And if I want to keep a group for 2 years, this is what I should do. Now, I had just had my 20-year anniversary with my players, and I just chose not to respond. Like, I think, but I kind of made a mental note that, okay, in 2 years' time, I'm actually going to find this comment. I'm going to ask him how it's still going. And it was around 2 years, like, oh crap, I've got up 10,000 comments. I don't even know how to find that dude. I thought, I was like, I'll contact him in 2 years, because my first thought is like, after it's like, don't insult me, I know more than you. And I kind of pulled my own head out of my butt. It's like, man, I remember the first time I had a group last 2 years. That's a pretty big accomplishment. That's cool. So, just once you learn to relax and have fun, I enjoy that.
Absolutely. So you have an award-winning contribution to Chaosium. How did that come about? Because that is super cool.
So Stygian Fox is it's a UK publisher that does a couple things. I've joined in some of their Kickstarters, and Stephanie, their editor-in-chief, always liked me because I did videos reviewing some of their stuff that we had played. I think Ladybug Fly Away Home was the first adventure theirs that I reviewed. And she would be active, and she would comment, and she and I would just kind of have the occasional side dialogue. And when they did the reprints for Miskatonic Valley, because they basically purchased the rights from a small publisher that went under and going to redo it, she just messaged me, and she's like, hey, we're doing this thing. It's got all of these little places around Lovecraft country, and there's nothing in Innsmouth. Would you like to write an adventure that takes place in Innsmouth? Because she knew I was a writer, and she knew that I knew at least how to analyze stuff. And deep down, I'm pretty sure she knew that my name on there would at least get some of my followers to purchase the thing. It's all good marketing. And Shadow of Innsmouth's one of my very favorite Lovecraft stories. It flips back and forth between that and Mountains of Madness. I was like, hell yeah. So she gave me a word count cap and said, like, you've got this many words. You have to stay canon with all of the Chaosium printed material. And
it's a big task.
Yeah. Well, when you're asked one day if you could do that, my gut was to say yes. But I also said, I don't have something ready, and I don't want to slap something together that sucks. So I said, hey, okay, let me get back to you. Like, give me 48 hours to get back to you, and let me come up with something. I'll pitch it to you to see if you think it's even decent. And so I came up with the concept for Mother's Love, and I pitched it to her like the next day. And she's like it, love it, let's do it. I'm like, okay, good. But otherwise, I knew if I had said yes, I then probably would have spent the next, month out of, I think, the 3 that I had to do it, trying to figure out how to even start. And then I would have slapped together some crap. But, so I had to tell her, hold that thought. Let me come up with something, and then I'll pitch it to you like I was approaching you with it.
Yeah, be in control of the situation.
I don't know. There's weird creative blocks we have. For some reason, that allowed me to not have the block. So, but that one just really came down to right place, right time, and the right people knew who I was. Because I've talked to a lot of creators, and I'll ask them that, like, how did you get into this? And they almost always have a completely different story about how they ended up writing for tabletop role-playing games. Like, there's not a universal one. I've met people that when I was 15, I submitted some stuff to Dungeon Magazine, and they published it. Like, well, holy crap! Like, you're every little geek's dream.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I didn't realize I was speaking to a savant here.
That, by the way, was a Professor Dungeon Master. He might not. I think he might have been 15 when he did that. He and I were talking about that long ago, and it was like, well, well, crap, dude, back in high school, I would have thought you were God. So everybody's got a different story, but mine was just that.
That's still super cool. Cthulhu was our first series that we did. We called them batches, because the coffee shtick. And so it was our first batch, and it went. I think for a first episode, it went as well as it could have hoped. And we do this section that we call espresso, and they're shorter episodes that we look into the lore. And so we looked into stories from H.P. Lovecraft that we thought were ones that people should know, including Dunwich Horror, which is the one that Chaosium likes to plug, and I think it's even in the Keeper's Manual. Mm-hmm. And then we looked at Missing Dews and Blackwater Creek as because it comes with the Keeper screen, so it's a nice value. But for our listeners at home that maybe haven't read or gone through A Mother's Love, what can you tell us about it?
Well, if you're familiar at all with Shadowed Innsmouth, it's a coastal town in the world of Lovecraft where the people have a weird cult, and a lot of them are turning into these fish frog monsters. And it is this isolated, decaying town. Since I knew I had to be set there, I knew I had to incorporate the fish frog monsters and the cult. But I've seen so many adventures where those are going to be the antagonist. You go to Innsmouth or you face deep ones, and now it becomes shooting deep ones. So the angle that I just chose to approach it is it's not about them. So the group, ideally you will be with federal investigators, but there's different ways you can bring in other parties. It is a bank robbing gang that has fled to Innsmouth, and their leader was originally from the town of Innsmouth. And they rob a bank in Ipswich, and they flee to Innsmouth, which was the next town. And so all the police and everything, they're following them around the country, have basically closed off all the roads leading in, and the investigators are sent in to flush out these criminals and work with the Innsmouth Constabulary to get them out. Well, if you've ever read any of the stuff for Chaosium Hazmat, all the Innsmouth Constabulary are Deep One hybrids. Like these are your partners now, as you're trying to get this bank robber out of this town that has all these horrible secrets that if your characters discover them, you are going to be in trouble. So part of the gag with that one, usually in Call of Cthulhu, your goal is you have to learn as much as possible about it. A Mother's Love, you actually do a lot better the less you learn about it, because you really are in the pit of vipers. And the vipers are like, if you don't notice us, we'll let you get this criminal and get this criminal out of here, and that way all this attention will leave. But if you notice us, it is on. So it's a manhunt, and you could be journalists coming in following up the story. It could be detectives that are trying to find something that this guy might have stolen. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Bounty hunters. But when we ran it, I play tested it a couple times, and we always did the federal investigators because I really like the idea that the investigators are the actual cops. Normally, we've always done adventures where you want to avoid the police, either because the police are in on it or because the police won't believe you, or we are cops, but we're dirty cops. We've never actually played a role-playing game where we were the cops and the good guys at the same time.
Oh, that's phenomenal. It sounds like a great one. We have plans to do follow-ups to some of the ones we've reviewed in the past, and so we'll have to keep that one in mind as we go forward. Are there any other ones that you recommend, people getting into it would check out?
Into Call of Cthulhu, Mr. Corbett from Mansions of Madness is one of the big ones that I always plug. It is a small person group, 1 to 2 players. I ran it with a single player. I think it is perfect for small groups. I love that one. Deadlight is another good one. Edge of Darkness. And those are actually my top ones. Then, of course, the haunting. You know, I don't know. I
That's
don't
what we
mention it
did,
just because it's like a given. Well, of course the haunting, but after the haunting, those are the three. So Deadlight, Edge of Darkness, and Mr. Corbett are the big ones for new GMs that I recommend. And also with Call of Cthulhu for new GMs, go ahead and pick up the free copy of Alone Against the Flames.
Yes.
And it's like an old choose your own adventure book. And it kind of teaches you how Call of Cthulhu kind of works. So that way you can kind of flail your way through the rules on that before you have to subject a player to it. And that way you're at least kind of slightly versed in the mechanics.
Yeah.
And that's free. So just like download it. And if not, it's a fun, but it's still kind of a GM yourself, learn the rules. So that's also just a given. So
I love the way that one is formatted, because it's it's like you said, a choose your own adventure, but instead of just like choosing, you roll the dice and it tells you your outcome, where you should go next. And so you're right, it is leading you through and teaching you what's appropriate and what's not. And then of course, Mansions of Madness was just reprinted in a new edition with a volume 2 coming soon, I believe. So widely accessible.
I was talking with Mike Mason 2 years ago, whatever the last Gen Con was. We had been working on a thing where we're kind of like bringing up suggestions, me and another reviewer, were of old out of print scenarios to update them for 7th edition. And I told him point blank, it's like, I think you should just take Mansions of Madness and just update it. Just the whole book. Like all the others, we would take one adventure out of a collection. I'm like, just take the whole damn thing, Mike. And he kind of nods. It's like, well, it's already in the pipeline. Don't worry. I'm like, okay, good. So all of those in that book are taken. He's like, yeah, they're all taken. They're all coming back. Like, oh, thank God. Because that pack of adventures, I guess the 6th edition, whatever the previous one was actually one of my first things I ever picked up for Call of Cthulhu. We were doing a homegrown system, and I was trying to get into Cthulhu, so I picked up Cthulhu Adventures, but I was running it with a different system. And Mansions of Madness just happened to be the one I picked up, which I think it's actually the best collection they made. So it might have been very different for me had I chosen a different one. So if anyone is just going to like say, I'm going to throw down the money to pick up a collection of adventures, can't go wrong with that one. Or I guess those, since they're about to release a volume 2.
Yeah. Hey there, friends. It's Ruin, and I'm here with Cade.
Hi, I'm still Cade.
We're just here to say thanks for giving us a shot and listening. During our refill, we wanted to take a moment on top of that to say we've got some social media. You should check it out. Join us in some conversation. And while you're at it, maybe hit that subscribe button.
Yeah. If you'd like to take a little bit more time, we would really appreciate it if you could rate and review us on whatever your favorite podcasting platform is. It helps us immensely with the mystical algorithms created by the elder gods of social media, and it helps us push the show to more people.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun doing this, and we hope you are too. But we'd like it if more people could join us, so go ahead and do those things.
We also have an email address. You can shoot us an email at cantripsandcoffee@gmail.com if you want to maybe suggest your favorite coffee or your favorite tabletop system that we haven't tried out yet. We're always looking for more suggestions and would love to hear some from you.
You may have also noticed that we're running out of topics on our side table conversations, so maybe shoot us a question that we could talk about there. As an added bonus, you can also look forward to some contests that we have up and coming. Trust me, they're going to be worth just hitting that little subscribe button.
There's also some pretty cool collaborations that we're working on with some other content creators.
It's an exciting time here in the Natural 20, and we want to make it as exciting as we can for you as well. So with that, we're going to jump back into the show. This is a question that just sprung to mind here. I know you say that Cthulhu is kind of newer in your repertoire than others, and yet it's one of the things you've made the most videos on. How does that correlate, and how is that, like, how have you seen that change over years?
How do you mean?
I guess what I'm getting at is, you pick up this edition of these stories and you start to get into it. And how do you think that helped you get into the idea of creating those videos, and how have you seen Cthulhu change since you started?
Well, so let me back up a bit. My actual introduction to understanding the Vegas thing about Cthulhu, or the Cthulhu mythos, I had heard about it. I was aware of there's a big squid-headed thing called Cthulhu. I knew there was a game called Call of Cthulhu. I had heard all the horrible things, like it's like you never survive and you always go insane, and all that. And I never knew how that would possibly be playable in any way. It did not sound remotely enjoyable. And the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society did a silent film for the Call of Cthulhu. And it actually was on a Netflix, right, when it released way back when. And I watched it, and that was my aha. I could do this. This is freaking amazing. So I got into Cthulhu by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society silent film. I highly recommend it. And so I wanted to start doing stuff like that, but I didn't want to change systems. Actually, I didn't mind changing systems. My players were so sick of the fact I kept changing systems on, they threatened to murder me. So I shoehorned it into a very homegrown. Once upon a time, it looked like Cyberpunk, but it no longer looked anything like Cyberpunk generic system we were playing. When I started doing the videos, I think I had been playing Call of Cthulhu for a year at that point. I started right when 7th edition released. When 7th edition, they gave some preview images. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm picking this up. And we were playing D&D 5th edition at the time, and I was not loving it. It just was not doing it for me. And Call of Cthulhu, I read it, and it was this aha, because I love the rules. I love the simplicity of it. It's very elegant. And I started doing these videos, I guess, after a year. And I think several things happened as far as the popularity of that game. One, as the pool of role players has grown and matured, a lot more people have started looking around to seeing what else is out there. It usually takes a role player a few years. Well, 5th edition came out. It got really popular. You had Critical Role. All these people come in. And after a few years, people start looking around and saying, what else is out there? And Chaosium has always had this weird niche up near the top, but never quite at the top. And Call of Cthulhu has always had that. And then people started finding my videos. And I think at one point Critical Role did a video on it. I suddenly got a ton of stuff when they talked about it. So I think I just happened to have all that stuff out there when the market started looking around and saying, what else is there? And then they found my stupid face saying, like, let's do this 1920s mystery game. And but I know I've pulled a lot of people into the game, but I think the size of the market, I've had a very minor effect, I believe. I think I've kept more people that were curious about it versus turning people onto it. But by the way, did you know in Japan it's the #1 game?
I heard that it was popular, but I didn't know it was the *1.
Oh, it's the #1 by far. And it has been for a long time. Sandy Peterson has wonderful stories about going to Japanese gods because he's like, yeah, like I've done all these things before, but like there I'm revered. But I think I just had a lot of good timing. But the circle for it's grown. Yeah, the products for 7th edition are absolutely gorgeous. And it really just takes somebody opening one of those books and seeing just how well they're done that it keeps them reading it, which some of the older editions weren't that pretty. So, if you get somebody to pick your book up in a store and flip through it, you got about 2 pages to grab their interest. Yeah. And I think the layout, the imagery, the simplicity, everything about it is so good that people will keep flipping through them. And I'm happy to see how well they're doing. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know because I've been into it, I want to say about 3 years now. And it's cool to see how even in the last 3 years, it's really taken off. And, they report some of their sales. Like I think it's now #2 on the Amazon UK and big milestones. Like, don't get me wrong, but when I started, it was like there wasn't these big publications. And now, especially this year, it just seems like they're just throwing them out there, these huge publications. They've got, the ones we already talked about, Mansions of Madness, and then they've got the smaller ones that just keep coming. They had Berlin last year, I think it was, or 2 years ago. And you're right, it's so great to see them doing well. It's cool. It's definitely cool.
You also do have stuff like Lovecraft Country going on HBO. In a very small way, you had season 1 True Detective. Have you ever seen season 1 True Detective?
Yeah, long time ago though, so I can barely remember it.
King in Yellow, baby. I remember the first episode, and I realized it was about Carcosa. It was like, oh my God, I am sold. So a lot of the mythos has been becoming much more pop culture familiar. So I think a lot more people they just have a base knowledge of it, or they think this could be fun or interesting. So, there is that, where just a lot of different media has started embracing this mythology. I think part of what it is one, you don't have to pay any one author for it because it's all public domain, right? It's not like, if you do Tolkien, you got to play the Tolkien estate. If you do Game of Thrones, you got to pay George. So, meanwhile, there's this dude that's been dead for 100 years. All his stuff's free. Let's do that. And it has been a cult level, cult, but it's been a cult popular for so long, and a lot of those people that grew up with that are now grown up to the point they're the ones that are making the media. They're the ones that are doing that, and it is bled through. Used to, like back when the guys making Batman are like, we're going to name the asylum Arkham as a node to Lovecraft, and now like so many people like they hear Arkham and they're like, is that a reference to Batman? Like, oh wow, how far we have changed.
Yeah. But
I think the pop culture has kind of evolved to the point that those are more household names, that it's less weird to pick it up the first time because you're at least vaguely familiar with what it will be about.
I think I heard the good friends of Jackson Elias once talk about how they cringed when they saw the plushies of Cthulhu, and how it just wasn't the same. And I kind of feel where they're at, but it's kind of also cool. Like I wouldn't mind getting my daughter one just as a soft introduction to the horror of the universe.
My introduction was, I was at a comic and game shop. I was probably in high school, and they had the Miskatonic University, home of the fighting cephalopods, Go Pods Go shirt. And the older friend that I was with, he knew about it, and he was like, Go Pods. I'm like, at the time, I'm like, what the hell's a cephalopod? So I knew it had something to do with octopi, and that was literally all I knew. But those cute little plushy things technically were my introduction to it in that way. It was the first time I was ever aware of the existence of it. So
I was going to say that like the first time I ever heard the word Cthulhu was on South Park, when they do he comes up in like one episode and they're like, no, Cthulhu. Like, it's the first time I'd ever heard it before.
So there was an old Ghostbusters cartoon from the 80s called The Collect Call of Cthulhu, where the Ghostbusters fought Cthulhu.
That's a great title. That is great. What is your favorite unique mechanic out of any of the systems that you play? And just a little bit about why. Like something unique to that system.
Oh my God. Unique mechanic? I'll tell you what, right now I am reading Cult, which is doing Powered by the Apocalypse system. The GM does not roll dice whatsoever. So
Interesting.
If the characters want to engage in combat, I'm just storytelling. So I'm like, okay, well, the bad guy, he pulls out his gun and he's pointing his gun at you, and the player says, I'm going to run up and I'm going to hit him in the face with a pipe wrench and brain him. I'm like, cool, let's roll violence. And as a player rolls, and if they roll really high, it's like, they start shooting, or maybe they don't even get a shot off. They don't even hit you. You knock them out. It works exactly how you wanted it to. Or if they fail, it's like, I hit you, and now you actually make dodges, or you roll your own hit points of damage. Or there's a middle ground where it's like, okay, you do pull it off, but maybe you got winged, or maybe you two, maybe he grabs the pipe wrench, you guys wrestle around, you fall down some stairs together, but in the end result, you get like this much damage that you have to save versus. And it is a very story-based or narrative-based system of combat, which sounds so weird and so counterintuitive the first time you read it. And when we tried it the first time, it was freaking amazing. But literally the player does one roll, and that is the whole combat.
That sounds cool, because it comes to sort of a common complaint that I've had from people when I DM D&D games, where it's like my one player will always be like, okay, so I want to run up with my axe and I go for the leg and I want to chop the leg off or something similar, like something really specific that they want to do. And then they roll 2 damage. And it's just like, okay, you nick his leg and not much else happens. And like that sounds cool. A more like narrative focus on combat. I like that.
Now I will say there is a trick. And I had been doing this before I started reading Cult, and I have definitely been doing this afterwards because I had never consciously thought about it, but it's just something I've unconsciously done. When you're doing combat, for most combats, something like D&D, where you go around the table and everybody takes a few points of damage. Nothing really dramatic happens, but it's kind of boring. You don't have to describe every single character of what they do. It's like, I stab him with my sword, you take 4 points of damage. And a lot of times the dungeon master will be like, okay, and you still up, and they describe the scene, and then they go to the next player, the next player, say, go through them all, whole round. And then at the end, that's the GM's like, okay, let me tell you what happened. And then you just go through the whole round as one really kind of brief synopsis, where it's like, he does this, but then he leaps back and this happens, and so drops a sword, and also you give it as a story versus these short little pieces, and that gets people really excited, because one, we get to the rolling a lot faster. We're not slowing down to drop the narratives that much. If something dramatic happens, go ahead and do it in the round, but otherwise go through it as fast as possible, and then let's tell what happened. And
I like that.
That works so much smoother. I hadn't realized I did that until I read Cult, and it tells you basically to do that. And I was like, well, holy crap. I just didn't know that's what I was supposed to do. So everything, my plays you mentioned afterwards, all of our fights, I always did that, instead of I usually did that, or I often did that. It was like, no, this is how I choose to do it now. And they are so much better as a result. I'm actually planning on doing a video where I say that, but it'll be like a 30-second video. I need to come up with more stuff to say.
No, I actually like that idea too, because like you say, you get a full picture of everything that happens in a round, so you don't like overhype one character's action, but then the next person like has an epic fail or something that then has to change the whole flow of the round. That's cool, getting all the storytelling of the combat done at the end. I like that.
And just everybody roll their dice, and the GM just takes all that and just weaves it together into this this cool little story all at the same time. And then it's like, and now the next round. So
that's cool.
One of the most common complaints of roleplay heavy systems is that there's that break in narrative whenever any sort of roll is made. So absolutely, you're just really speeding it up and expediting the whole thing so that you can get to the good parts.
Yeah, that's actually all we care about, is that story.
Yeah.
Oh, and kicking the monster's ass and taking its treasure, but the story about how you did it.
Yeah. If you had to play one edition of D&D for the rest of your life, what edition would you choose?
It's going to kill me for this. I'd just play 5th.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. I'm an old school player. I started with first, because that's my GM. He was experienced. Second edition, it just came out. He's like, I'm not buying new books. You go to use bookstores to get all this. So I was an avid first, then second edition player. But I know I am very good at them because I know how they're broken in certain ways. 5th edition just works. I do have a lot of complaints about it, but on the overall, I think it's the best of them. So I go with 5th.
Yeah. And you can always just because of how the games work, it's so freeform. The things you don't like, you can always just kind of touch up.
I would rather start with a system that's not wonky.
Yeah.
And house rule the hell out of it versus versus ever having to explain to another person alive how in the hell THACO works or why saving throws you roll high while this you roll low and blah 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 blah. No, I just start with 5th edition and just house rule it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. Let's see. When you're running a game as a GM, what is more entertaining for you to work with from a story perspective? Someone rolling a 1 or a 20, like critical success or critical failure?
Failure.
Yeah.
Best stories are failure. There is an endorphin rush when your character does something amazing. And sometimes those do make some amazing stories, but it's usually only if they do something amazing when it shouldn't have. Failure was the most likely outcome, and all of a sudden they just kick ass. Those are great stories, and we love those. But the stories that are actually the ones that we talk about a decade or more later are the ones of just the most insane, hilarious failure, which at the time you're like, oh God, that sucks. And those, we laugh the hardest at them, and we love those the most. It's not that you necessarily want them to fail, but we just embrace the hell out of it when it happens, because it just happens a lot to us because our dice hate us.
Yeah. I always found too, when you're sitting around a table and somebody rolls a 1 or whatever the critical fail is, like everyone on the table leans in. They're like, oh yeah, let's see what's going to happen here.
That's something we've talked about a lot, is the idea that everybody loves an underdog. Everybody wants to see the failure that somehow came out on top. And I think that's the one thing that, you know, you always have those players that you don't want it to be, but they hide their dice rolls and you know why they're doing it. And if they could only just embrace that failure is often better for the whole session, then, you know, it would make that just the dream scenario.
It's, yeah, I think I've done a video over like the player that hides their dice rolls. And the problem was I was never sure if they were cheating, but it drove my other players insane. Yeah, I don't know if I ever even made it clear on that. It's like they had a bigger problem with it than me, but it was a player that absolutely just abhorred failing. And it's like, but the stories that we remember, you know, years and years later are those ones that they're just hilarious. And like I said, the first rule is to have fun. Well, that's how we ended up having fun, was just the stupidity of our things. I had to start changing how I phrase stuff. I'd always like, God, your characters are such idiots. And I was referring to the fact they kept dropping their swords or all that stuff. But they were taking it personally. Like I was calling them stupid for playing their characters stupidly. And it's like, no, I'm calling you stupid because you guys are like the three freaking stooges of dropping stuff. So I had to like learn how to change my phrasing, because their gut instinct was that I was like talking about them personally. When it's like, no, it's just there's this Keystone Cops thing that just keeps happening.
All right. The last question I had is, what would you say are the pros and cons of playing with a map and miniatures versus strictly from imagination? And do you have a hard preference one way or the other?
I'm absolutely a minis guy.
Yeah.
There's a few things for it. I mostly like minis for me as the GM. I can keep track of where everything is. I know how many monsters are on the freaking board. I know that so-and-so is across the room when the trap goes off or the fireball gets dropped. There's no debating. When the door slams shut, the room fills with water, and all of a sudden there's that one person that's like, well, I wasn't in the room, I was at the hall. It's like, yeah, but your mini was standing right next to that treasure chest.
Yeah.
Like, well, it's like, yeah, your mini was next to that treasure chest. It clears it up. Or for the players, it helps them see the framework of it, of like, this is how the place is laid out, and their strategies will change. We're very strategic players. And it just really is helpful, especially if you've got a lot of characters on the board, like monsters or whatnot. It's just really freaking easy to tell. It's like, Bill has 5 bugbears on him. Maybe we should help Bill because he's getting overrun, because you can see them. I've played Theater of the Mind. I've done that many times. I don't use miniatures for every single scene, but whenever we need it, and sometimes the players will say, "Can you just draw this out? Let me see it." I'll draw it out. But I absolutely love miniatures for that. It's a technique to help us tell the story better and alleviate confusion.
Yeah, I've done both quite a bit, and like you said, I don't use it for everything miniatures, especially for like just traveling or role playing. It's like, let's just do it in our head. But I totally agree for combat. Sometimes, like, I've been getting used to it since we've been having to play over Discord and stuff so much that it's like we're kind of exclusively doing theater of the mind, as you called it. But I do miss having the like whiteboard. We used to have like a table-sized whiteboard, and we just lay it down on the table and like draw all the combat scenes out on it and stuff.
We still use like Roll20, and we've got like little icons and stuff we
Yeah.
can move around. And with Call of Cthulhu, there's this belief that miniatures destroy the game, which is the most bizarre thing. It's not that I think they're necessarily like wrong for not using them. It's their vehement hatred of it that upsets me because they're so venomous towards it. It's like, well, it becomes a combat game. Like, no, but sometimes I like to know exactly how many ghouls are in the room and kind of where they are and that. And for some reason, people believe that once you pull out miniatures, you're busting out a tape measure or the line of sight lasers because you're counting down, like you are exactly 13 feet from the bad guy and your range on your weapon is at 12 feet. And, you are not, it's like, no, it's all squishy math with us. It's just, they're over that direction. It really helps us. So I love it. I'll always preach on that mountain.
I'm so glad you touched upon, Cthulhu's hatred of it, because one of my biggest frustrations is that I want some minis and they're hard to find because of that exact thing. They don't want them,
Raff them, man.
I didn't even know that was a thing, to be honest.
Raff them. They're Canadian.
Yeah,
you got them right where you are.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I have heard of them. Yeah.
You'd think that they'd love the miniatures because of how interesting the Cthulhu creatures and stuff look. Like, I'd love the style of my little investigator with the 1920s trench coat and the nice little fedora.
Oh yeah, man. There's so much more fun to paint, especially if they're wearing a trench coat, because it's like, good. My eyesight's not what it was to do like the button on every pouch. Now it's a big coat. Okay, cool. It's done.
The game shops to me are very much like the kid in the candy store. I go into them and I'm looking at everything. I'm like, what could I buy? What could I buy? And that's what bothers me. Is I go in there and they don't carry that stock. And so you're right. And you raffle them, right? That's the company. Yeah. So I have been on their website, but the fact that they're not in stores doesn't make it an impulse buy.
Yeah, no, and it's really weird. Is the number of miniatures that are available in stores, at least where I go to, is so much less. Used to, that was a massive part of the game shop, and there were different lines. Like there's the big Shadowrun line, and then of course all the D&D, your basic fantasy ones. But then you had like all the battle techs and all of this, and now all the miniatures in the game shops I go to take up as much room as the smallest of all the brands that I just named, where it's like, wow, we got like 3 pegs with miniatures on it. Like used to, this was an entire wall, floor to ceiling that of all these miniatures. And now it's not like that. And I don't know why. A lot of people theorize that it's the stuff where you can 3D print them. Hero Forge, which is awesome, but I don't know. I remember being a kid. I wouldn't spend my lunch money. I would save that and then I'd go to the shop and then I'd like pick up a Ralph Arthur Grenadier miniature in middle school. Then I'd go home and paint it. And that was like my day. Every day I painted a new miniature. Unless I wanted a really big one, I had to save up 2 days worth of lunch money. So.
Perfect. I'm going to take us into, it's a brand new section. We're premiering it with you tonight. And of course, it has to have a coffee name. So we're going to call it Nitro Brew as a pun on that's quick. Okay. And so I just want you to say the first thing that comes to mind, and just bear in mind, they're really stupid. So just go with it. Are you ready, Seth? Are you ready?
Okay.
All right. Desert Island game.
Castaway?
Player or GM?
GM.
Coffee.
Hot.
If you had a warning label, what would it say?
Oh, God. Do not let in public.
First job.
Delivery driver for a drug front. Didn't know that at the time.
That's hardcore. I like
Next question. You don't get any more.
Yeah, I know I can't. Oh my gosh. Why did I do this? Music or films?
Depends on the mood.
Favorite book other than your own?
Okay, well, got instinct. Silence of the Lambs.
Lieber or Lovecraft?
Lieber.
Fill in the blank. Taylor Swift is.
Young.
Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers?
No.
Is double dipping at a party ever acceptable?
It's just a party of one.
Last one. Say sorry in a Canadian accent.
Story.
Sorry. You gotta raise it. Like sorry.
Sorry.
Oh yeah. Oh sorry.
Yeah, I don't.
That's okay. It's all right.
I'm so bad at accents.
It's okay. We already know that I can't pronounce half the words I say, so just say it with confidence.
I understand the curse.
That's fair. Okay, so thank you for indulging in that dumbest game ever. A couple last questions for you here before we wrap up for the night. First of all, other than tabletop games, what's one piece of media that you've been enjoying lately?
Other tabletop games, let's see. Man, I've had like my little thing of shows. I've really enjoyed The Expanse last season that just finished up. So now I am reading that book for that season. I actually watch the season, then I read the book that it's based on because I tend to enjoy it better that way. Versus if you read the book first, then you watch the show, and then you're all like, "That's not how it was in the book." So I do it the opposite. So enjoyed that. Enjoying WandaVision, like now that it's awesome, but you had to muscle through the first part where it just wasn't. But so I'm enjoying the Expanse books and enjoying some TV.
WandaVision's an interesting. I love vintage television, but after that first episode, what the hell is going on here? But you're right. It hits a point where it gets its stride.
So hold on. I'm about to open up a rant here. So this is about to be a 3-hour episode. Okay. So
this is a Cantrips and Coffee exclusive, people.
This is my problem with most streaming media now, is that they forgot how to tell a story with the proper timing. So many times do we see a show where it's like, okay, wait till the third episode and then it gets good. It's like, okay, each episode is an hour. You want me to commit 3 hours before I care? Okay, let's rewind. Let's look at a 2-hour movie. Raiders of the Lost Ark. You were invested in this dude in the first 2 minutes of what is going on. And it is done, and you're halfway through Temple of Doom by the time we get 3 hours in, and that's when I think I should begin to care about this Netflix show, like seriously. But there's this assumption that you will always go to the next episode, that you will like these characters because you're supposed to, because they're the heroes, and they don't give you a reason to. And they try to sometimes take a 2-hour movie and they break it into 8 episodes, and they do the timing of an 8-hour movie, which in an 8-hour movie, the 50% mark is called the point of no return. Here, let me show you my actual film school training. So the 50% mark is the point of no return, where our character, if they take one step further, cannot go back. They are committed until the end. So when they do these shows, they do the whole thing at one time like it's a movie, and then they put that halfway through the mid episode. Well, at that point, I'm 6 hours in. I finished Lord of the Rings in the meantime before they actually give me what's called the point of no return. They don't realize that they actually have to shove a lot of that earlier on. So many shows just bore the hell out of me because they don't know how to time it right. So WandaVision, I love the setup of the old style and the black and white, and we got the Dick Van Dyke going on, and then we went to that 70s with Mary Tyler Moore. I grew up on Nick at Night. I knew all these shows, but it was like, come on, guys, you actually have to give me a better hook than this. This is cool, but come on, give me I have to see the next episode, not I'm supposed to see the next episode. Give me a need to. On contrast, you have The Mandalorian. That show hooks you so damn fast. I mean, it went in, it came for the throat. And by the time the child even appears, I am like, I will watch this show all the way through, and I will play with my action figure during this. I am hooked. And then they bring in the child. It's like, oh, sweet Jesus, this is the greatest thing that's ever existed.
Yeah,
I was already hooked before that happened. They didn't wait 3 episodes before they were all like, oh, yeah. And by the way, here's the cutest Muppet in the history of the universe. They just jumped in and they went for the throat. And they're like, this dude's a badass and he's going to do badass stuff. And look, here's Carl Weathers. Isn't that badass? And now he's going to, there's this robot spinning around and shooting people. Ain't that badass? And here's the cutest baby of all time. Boom. 1 freaking episode. And that was it. That's how you do a streaming show. WandaVision did not know that.
They do it without showing the character's face, which goes back to what you said about like, you're supposed to love them because they're the character. And we're like, who is this dude?
But he's got a personality. He's got quirks. It pulled on so many of those things that are ingrained in our pop culture sort of needs. And wasn't that they were referencing them? They pulled on the same strings they did, like certain elements of why good Westerns worked. So it wasn't that they were trying to recreate a Western or a samurai film, because a lot of the good Westerns were just ripped off samurai films. And by the way, Star Wars is just ripped off samurai films.
Kurosawa,
Kurosawa never gets enough credit. Pulled on those exact same threads that we like in stories, and they're very quick. They are tropes that we love. They're storytelling techniques that are centuries old, and they're just hardwired into us, and they worked. They did it masterfully. Meanwhile, WandaVision, they released 2 episodes back to back at first, and you watch them, and you're like, okay, well, I've already watched this much of this. I guess I'll watch a little bit more to see what's going on. But it's not a need to have it. It's mostly, so you'll explain to me what's going on, which is kind of the J.J. Abrams school of directing Lost, which was, I'm just going to give you hooks, and the only reason you want to watch this is to get the hook out of you. But and it is something that I've grown to resent, because so many other shows have started trying to do that, what he did. So anyways, that is my problem and my rant with streaming.
That's why
I don't know how to time it.
That's why, like, the second time watching Lost is never the same, because nothing's a mystery or a hook anymore, and it's just like, oh yeah, I remember how this goes down. Like, there's nothing there.
So when I was at Gen Con 2019, I was I went with the writer symposium. So I came with all the authors and editors and stuff. So it's a big gaming convention, and in like the side passage of one hotel, there's like all these authors and things. So I'm on a panel in there, and I remember it was actually a really packed room. I think somebody more famous than me was in there, but I had mentioned that I think J.J. Abrams is actually a very bad storyteller, and like half the room gasped and the other half nodded. And I gave my reason. Like, I think he's the best in the industry at a hook. I think he is an absolute master. He doesn't know how to close a hook. Like he's terrible at it, or thinking about the long-term ramifications of something cool that he threw in. And then 3 months later, the Rise of Skywalker came out, and everybody's like gave those exact same complaints I did. I'm like, told you. Like,
yeah. After a while, it almost just seems like cheap parlor tricks, because everybody's doing it and it's nothing really special. You know, it amuses, but it doesn't show mastercraft.
Ooh, a movie I did just watch this week that I thought was freaking awesome, Prospect. Sci-fi movie with Pedro Pascal.
Quite good.
Zero budget movie. That one. Oh my God. It was very well done. They squeezed every damn penny out of their budget they could. They spent every dime just very well. And one of the things I loved about it is there are so many little details and so many elements that hint at a much larger world and a lot of lore. Yeah. And just incredible amounts of this world. None of it is ever explained. It is just pieces of this world. So they don't have to stop and give you the reason why their writing looks like this, or why this is the pop star or anything like that. It is just, you accept this is the world. We're going to focus on the story. And that is also one of the things that has been missing a lot in a lot of speculative fiction, where they feel like they have to tell you about the world building. And really what I love is I love seeing that world that looks real and you don't have to stop and explain it to me. And I'll never know all this stuff. But we had a great story, fun movie. So as far as media that I enjoyed this week's Prospect just blew me away. So really enjoyed it.
I really liked in that one how much I liked and just hated Pedro Pascal's character at the same time. It's just you did this wholesome thing, but then you did this horrible thing, and I don't know which one to balance out.
You never know. It's like, I want you to die horribly, or do I want you to survive? Is there a way we can have both? So I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. I'll have to check that one out. I haven't seen it, but I think I've seen it. Is it a Netflix one?
It's on Netflix.
I'm pretty sure it's Netflix original. Yeah.
I don't think it was an original. It was on Amazon first.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. And it sat in my queue so long that it then vanished. I was like, and then I saw it on Netflix. Like, it's back. So
you're not the only person I've heard comment on the verisimilous nature of it, how everything is living and breathing, and you just go with it, right? And I think I agree with you that too often we go for the setup, and it goes back to your comment about the hook. We're trying our best to get them in without actually just telling our best story right off the get-go. Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of all I have for you tonight, Seth. Thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time. Before we go, where can people follow you online?
Well, of course, there's my YouTube channel under the highly imaginative name Seth Skorkowsky, and then there is my Twitter. I'm most active on Twitter, which is just S Skorkowsky. Good luck spelling my mouthful name. And of course, any of my books and stuff you can find on Amazon or Audible, and which I'm an audiobook addict, so I always recommend Audible because I just like listening.
Excellent. What's the one book that people should check out first?
Oh man, I've got two answers for that. I've got three books in three genres. Dameron is the first of my Valducan series. Is a very actiony urban fantasy about monster hunters, and that is by far my most popular. And so that is usually the one I recommend because that is most likely going to get somebody I don't know very well to enjoy it. My most recent one, Ashes of Onyx, is actually what I consider my best written. And I love that book, but it is the least appealing, I think, because it's a new weird is the genre. So it is a portal fantasy about a junkie sorceress that's going between worlds trying to get to Carcosa. And it's a bizarre plot. So that's my favorite, but it's not the one I recommend the most.
Yeah, it sounds great. Perfect. Well, with that, I'm out of coffee, and that means it's time to go.